Good morning. I'm David Gooding. Easter is always an important time of the year for any Christian, but the Easter that's just passed carried particular significance for me as it marked the conclusion of my 14 years of ordained ministry in Pisgah Baptist Church. It was bittersweet. On the one hand, there were loads of hugs and a wonderful time of collective thanksgiving and celebration for the many memories and precious moments that we shared as a family of faith. But on the other, it was a time of sadness and even grief, as a special season drew to an end. Now I believe, as it says in Ecclesiastes, that there's a time for everything, there's a season for everything. But the difficulty, speaking for myself, comes in discerning and indeed accepting what God is calling us to pick up or to put aside at any particular point in our faith journey. The decision to leave ministry and step back for a time was a big one, and it was so hard to make. Indeed, I wasn't going to make it hastily. I spent over a year discerning what God wanted, a process that began in focused fashion back in February 2022, when I went away on a kind of lone spiritual retreat. Now, I shared my reflections in text form on this Facebook page at the time, and I'd like to return to these thoughts today for this Thought of the Day slot. Because back then, while I didn't get a specific answer at the time to my question, should I stay or should I go now? God did speak more generally, and he encouraged me in a way that I really needed to hear. An encouragement that I hope may also bless you today. So there I was, alone in the hotel room back in February 22. I arrived on a Sunday evening and stayed to the following Tuesday morning. It was quite a last-minute thing, really, because I'd initially booked to attend an annual Baptist Ministers' Conference, but that had been called off at short notice because COVID rates are on the rise. I couldn't get my hotel fees refunded because I'd gone for the cheapest package. As the church had generously paid all the costs and, as I also felt in strong need of some spiritual space, I decided to go anyway and spend the day with God. That sounds super spiritual, doesn't it? I'm not super spiritual. It's a rare treat that I very often get a chance to have. Well, I was wondering when I got there if I'd made a terrible mistake, because as I drew up on that iron grey, late, cold afternoon in February, I saw the budget hotel was absolutely smothered in scaffolding. And the window in the stairwell as I trudged up to my room had been smashed and covered with protective film. I've been to Christian centres and on Christian conference retreats in the past, all godly calm and aesthetically soothing. But this felt depressingly dystopian by contrast. What had I done? But I was here, it was what it was. And I knew deep down that I still needed to be here. Because, like all ministers, I'm a hypocrite. Exhorting members week in and week out to speak, to relate, and to draw close to God, while struggling to find the time and the inner quiet to do this as consistently and meaningfully as I know I also need to. Some weeks I speak the language of life from the lectern of a pulpit, while feeling as spiritually lifeless as a wrinkled old current inside. In my hotel room, I'd been reflecting on calling, service, and ministry, all the while aware of how poorly qualified I felt to serve God in the areas that he had placed me. Aware of my broken weakness and, quite frankly, apologising over and over again to God for being so rubbish. In the process of this, and cutting to the chase now because the whole process took many hours, I was led to reflect on how God places his treasure in jars of clay. And no, he won't remove it and place it somewhere that looks more appropriate to my eyes. Anyway, as I walked down to breakfast the next morning, eschewing the lift for the stairwell, I once again passed the shattered window that had so depressed me when I arrived the evening before. It was still broken, still fundamentally flawed, but this time I was mesmerised. because with the light of the early morning sun shining through it, it looks so beautiful. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture to remember it by, because I really felt that this was God's gift to me, that image, God's illustration and affirmation of what he'd been showing me in my hotel room. The fact that he chooses depressingly, unappealingly broken, flawed vessels. He fills them with his treasure, and despite themselves, he causes them to shine. And I've attached the photo I took as a thumbnail to this video. Now, initially, I was going to keep this experience and accompanying photo to myself. Sharing it felt like sharing something too personal, and I confess that makes me feel vulnerable. But then I wrestled with a nagging thought, a God thought perhaps, that suggested somebody else might also derive some encouragement. Well, if that's you, then God bless you. And may he fill you full of his treasure and cause you to shine. For you too are deeply precious to him and unspeakably beautiful. Amen.